Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for asking Beverley and I to come along today to talk to you about our work nationally that focuses on parental involvement, parental engagement, family learning, and learning at home. So just a small remit, but it's a real pleasure to share some of our work and hopefully hear from all of you. We're always looking to increase our knowledge and understanding and make improvements where we can as well. So if we move to the other slide, Beverley, I will just go over what we're going to be covering today. Okay, so what we're going to be focusing on is the legislative landscape and some of the key national developments that we have been working on. So that will include the national data, Parents on Scotland consultation, family engagement in secondary schools, which is one of our newer resources, as well as the Aligning Family Learning and the Promise. And that's really a guide for family learning professionals and GIRFEC strategic leads. We'll go over that in a wee second. We're also going to look at the engaging parents and families to improve school attendance, as well as finishing up on one of our newest pieces of work, which is our ITE evaluation report and executive summary. And we'll also talk a wee bit about our next steps nationally and touch on some of our resources. So there really is a lot of information to take in. So please feel free to stop us if you need some clarifications or just go over something that you missed. The slides, I believe, Max, will also be shared after the session, so we're always happy for people to contact us after. So yeah, Beverley, if you want to, I'm going to just hand over to Beverley. We'll just work together through the next slides to give you the overall national picture. So I'm going to hand over to you.
All right. So apologies again. So we've mentioned the 4 areas of parental involvement, parental engagement, family learning and learning at home. And you might well say, well, what is the difference between all of those? And so we developed this slide to really help practitioners and educators and researchers understand what the national definitions of these 4 areas are. So we're now going to move on to some of the legislation in Scotland, and I would have to say there's a whole range of legislation around this topic and around parental involvement, engagement, family learning and learning at home. One of the main pieces of legislation that Max referred to was the Scottish Schools Parental Involvement Act that came into place in 2006, and that really has been the envy of a lot of other nations and internationally, because we are one of the few countries to have legislation which gives parents the right to be involved in their children's learning, but also the right to have their views heard and the right to be supported at home with their children's learning. So some of the other key policies and legislations that I would draw your attention to then is in 2017, where a review was carried out of the Parental Involvement Act, and that was really looking at the 10-year impact that the Act had had. So the National Parent Forum of Scotland undertook that review. So you'll get the link to the those key documents later on. Susan, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, yes, the presentation will be handed out. I saw that wee comment coming in. So there's a few key documents for family learning within this timeline, but I just want to pick out a few here that were important for the visibility of family learning in Scotland. The first is the Family Learning Review, which was published in 2016. This document was developed after an extensive consultation period. We conducted cross-sectoral surveys, focus groups with staff, families, anyone involved or adjacent to family learning to inform the document. We also conducted a literature review and trolled through current policy and strategy at that time to see where family learning as an approach was embedded. So what it gave us was a snapshot of where family learning was at that time. and we were able to develop recommendations for Education Scotland, Scottish Government, local authorities and the research community to address and work on moving forward. We've just updated this document, as we have all of our documents on our Parents and Families theme page, but it's still a good starting point for anyone wanting to get a foundational knowledge of family learning in Scotland. One of the recommendations from the field informed the next publication for family learning in 2017, which was the Family Learning Framework. So that basically really is just a how-to guide on how to plan, deliver and evaluate family learning programmes. In Scotland, another important document that we encourage family learning practitioners to be aware of is the Adult Learning Strategy. An updated version was published last year, maybe 2 years ago now. It's an important document for those not familiar with adult learning and the impact that it can have, particularly for sectors whose primary focus would be children and young people, because family learning, of course, includes the whole family, and there are specific skills involved in working with adults and children together. And this document can provide some insight on how you support adults in particular. It's also good for schools, ELC settings, colleges, anyone not involved in the CLD world to know who can help support their families and what referral routes are available to them within their local authorities. Partnership is a really key factor when it comes to family learning. And the final documents would be the Higgius documents. These are used by our inspectors as part of the inspection process. They were refreshed in 2016 and more recently for CLD. In 2016, as part of our consultation exercises with the field, one of the requests was for an additional QI for family learning. So you'll find this QI in both the How Good Is Our Schools For and Early Learning and Childcare. All of the Higio documents were developed so that you can work across them all. They have a common language, so can be used by partners from all sectors, which is really great for family learning because the workforce is so diverse and includes practitioners from early learning and childcare, schools, CLD, colleges and the third sector. It's also important to note that it is a choice QI, but what we're seeing nationally from inspection findings is that year on year schools and ELC settings are increasingly using the family learning approach to engage their families in a learning outcome, which of course is positive. A wee health check on this would be that both documents are currently being reviewed and refreshed at the moment. I'm not sure if the choice QIs will be included, but parents and families will of course be embedded throughout, I'm sure. I'll hand over to you, Beverley. Next slide.
Okay. So you can imagine amongst all of this policy landscape that it's easy to forget some of the areas, and we were finding that in some of the work that we're doing across the country. So Susan and myself developed what we call the Professional Learning Guide, and again you'll get that on our website. And as part of that, what we thought it was important to do was to bring practitioners back to those legislative duties, to remind them of the things that are in the Act. And this slide here is just helping practitioners and educators to know what they have to do under the legislation. Again, there are current priorities and these are changing constantly, but again, this slide just helps practitioners and educators to think about all of the different priorities that they may be working on. So we're going to move on now to some of the national key developments. We do like to use data for a lot of our work, and one of the key sources for that has been the Parental Involvement Engagement Census data. That was last carried out in 2021, with the findings being published in 2022. That gave us a lot of information about what the barriers were that was preventing parents and carers from getting involved in their children's learning. Now, I'll give you time later on when you've got the presentation to look at those reasons that they have identified. So again, within the Professional Learning Guide, you will see this slide, and what we were trying to do here is to look at the reasons for parents not getting involved and one way of doing that was to think about the different agendas. As you can see from this slide, these are all very genuine reasons for getting parents involved, not least because of the legislation, but they're looking at ways that they can do it. But when we come on to the parents themselves, they have a different agenda. They may well be thinking about, why am I working 2 jobs and still can't provide for my family? Who can I ask for help and support? Where will I get money to pay for the bills? When will things change? How am I going to wash my children's clothes without electricity? And how am I going to keep the children warm without heating? So when we turn up to ask them to help them help us to review our policies, you can see that it's maybe just not the same agenda that we're working to. Susan, you want to talk about the roadmap?
So in this slide, we see the roadmap that we also developed for the professional learning guide. It was developed to hopefully make it easier for practitioners to understand barriers to participation. It provides suggestions to identify potential barriers to support more effective and meaningful involvement and engagement with parents and families in their settings or school. This, some of you may already know about the front-facing website that we have for parents and families. This really is just to give parents and families the most up-to-date information from the curricular areas and also resources that they can use at home as a family. It's constantly refreshed, and we hold consultation sessions with parents to make sure that it's fit for purpose, and Beverley will expand on those in the next slide.
So as a matter of course, we review the content on the website every 1 to 2 years. And what we were finding on one of the learning at home pages for literacy was that the videos were getting outdated and we needed to refresh that. So we undertook a consultation last year with parents, and it was entitled, "What does your child like to read, write, listen to and talk about?" So the consultation findings are published on our Parents and Families theme page. It's very, very informative. It covers areas much wider than just literacy. It talks about parents' anxieties over the children's writing, over digital devices, about the future. It's a very, very informative document, and I would advise that you go and have a wee read at that. Do you want to talk about the resources?
Of course. One of the most enjoyable parts of our job is working collaboratively with partners and stakeholders who have identified a gap in the system. The next 2 slides are resources that we were asked to develop by practitioners who needed support in specific areas. So this happens every so often, and we are always delighted to work in this way. So in this slide, we see the Engaging Families in Secondary School resource. We were approached by 3 secondary schools who were running successful secondary family engagement programs, but were aware, as we are nationally, that their colleagues within secondary education found it a wee bit more challenging. So we worked together to develop the resource that provided advice and guidance alongside examples of how this could be embedded successfully. And we launched it through a webinar, and you can access it on our Parents and Families page. Next slide, Beverley. So similarly, we were approached by the Promise Scotland colleagues who were aware that there were family learning workers delivering on the promise, but were being missed during the reporting phase. So asked to work with us on a resource that aligned family learning values and the principles set out within the promise. To achieve a robust resource that could be used by all sectors, we worked with Dumfries and Galloway Children's Services and Family Learning Team and Aberdeen City Council Family Learning Team to develop the resource, and also accompanying adaptation of the Promise Award. So you can go through the Promise Award yourself through our website, or you can do it as part of some training with a team within your local authority. So again, you'll find that on the Parents and Families theme page.
If you've had an eye on the media, you will probably have noticed some articles about attendance in school and how that has deteriorated over a number of years, and it certainly is one of the Cabinet Secretary's priorities at this moment. So this graph really just shows you when the decline starts and why it has become such a topical matter within education. So you can see that the decrease really has started around 2012-13. I think it's been quite common to think that it maybe started as a result of COVID and maybe a challenge in getting children, young people back into school. But this graph shows us that it actually started much earlier than COVID. And this particular slide is showing an increase in the amount of unauthorised absences from school, and again the trend is increasing from the same year. You may or may not be aware that fortnightly absences are published by Scottish Government, and the link to that is in the bottom of the page, and you can filter that by local authority and different measures there. So if you are involved with schools, it might be an interesting source of information for you.
So we can tell, so we can tell by the stats that there is an issue with attendance for various reasons. And it is a real priority for Scottish Government and also for Education Scotland. So we were asked to look at it from the perspective of parents. And one of the things that we always do is we do a bit of a trawl through research and policy and strategy to get a handle on, where we need to focus to make the biggest difference. And one of the things that we found through our research was that parents' attitudes towards education certainly do influence attendance. And they were a significant predictor of personal responsibility, both social and emotional, academic motivation, attendance at school, and engagement in lessons. So that means that although the children and young people could be going to school, they might not actively be engaging in the subjects themselves. Next slide. So in order to support that area, we worked with different teams within Education Scotland, but also schools that were getting it right. They were bucking the trend, actually. So we developed the Engaging Parents and Families to Improve Attendance at School resource, which you can find on Education Scotland's website. There are, I think, 6 tiles that support attendance, and ours can be found on that. Again, we like a sketch note, so we were able to develop a sketch note. We also have podcasts with the schools that are working effectively in that area. And also we had 2 webinars that are filmed that you can access. So we hope that this will support practitioners, particularly when they're working with parents and families, on attendance. Next slide, please, Beverley.
We could probably just cover over that one. So we've talked a lot about the legislation and how important that is in Scotland, and the work on the attendance is no different. So you'll see the different acts and the different policies and strategies there that are all linked with attendance. As Susan mentioned earlier, the tiles that's on that page about improving attendance at school, and you will find the wider report, which is called the Improving Attendance, Understanding the Issues, that was undertaken by some of our attainment advisors and others working in partnership with them. Again, one of the tiles that we talked about is around developing a plan, a policy, and some guidance for schools. So as I said, if you are working in this area, we would direct you to that particular tile to have a wee look at that. I'll hand over to you, Susan.
Thanks, Beverley. So one of the main things that we look at for our area is equipping the workforce and ensuring they have access to and are signposted towards professional learning opportunities, resources, case studies, research, and current examples of good practice. So we do that through our Parents and Families theme page, which you can access freely. It's also important for us to ensure that staff have the required competencies, skills, values needed to work with parents and families to support their child's and their own learning journey. I'd mentioned before about family learning having that adult component. So really what we're looking to do is build the capacity of the parents so they are able to support their child and young person. So developing the workforce can indeed be challenging for us all, and it is quite a complex economic and financial environment that we're all working in, but it really is crucial for us to be focused in that area. In order to support that, we have mentioned before that we have developed the professional learning guide that, again, you can find on our website. Next slide. So one of the areas that we are currently focusing on and we're just about to publish an evaluation of is our ITE pilot placement programme. So this actually came about due to a mapping exercise that we did with local authorities and ITE providers. We did this after COVID, and the reason for that is we had intended to do it before COVID with the ITE Knowledge Exchange group that we're involved in, but obviously COVID really kind of put a stop to a lot of things. But we revisited it after COVID. So one of the things that we found was that there was a bit of an inconsistent picture across the country on when student teachers and indeed teachers were being exposed to training and development around parents and families. So in order to support that, we developed the strategic framework for parental involvement, engagement, family learning and learning at home with not just the ITE providers, but also local authorities as well. We had a formal launch of the strategic framework by the Cabinet Secretary in May 2023. And because we had one of our colleagues in Edinburgh University come along and talk about a placement programme she had with Edinburgh Family Learning Team and how successful that had been, North Lanarkshire Council contacted us to see how they could get involved, and from there the pilot emerged. Next slide, please.
So there was 4 stages of the pilot, and we're not going to go into too much detail about it today because we have a national webinar coming up next month, and we would invite you along to hear more about the evaluation and to hear all about the pilot itself. And so there was 4 stages. The first one with the University of West of Scotland in North Lanarkshire, second one with Strathclyde and North Lanarkshire, third one the Royal Conservatoire, Scotland and North Lanarkshire, and the fourth one Aberdeen University and Aberdeen City Council. I'm just going to skip through these for the sake of time, but they had different durations. The first one was 2 weeks. The second one was a shorter time on a weekly basis, but lasting over a longer period of 7 weeks. The third one was 2 days per week, but lasting for 4 weeks. And the last one was 2 weeks. So just move on to some of the benefits.
Okay. Sure. So I've been very privileged to be able to do some podcasting with both the students and also the staff involved. And I have to say, we hadn't anticipated how successful it would be. We really were setting out to look to build the confidence of student teachers to be able to effectively engage with parents. but we found that we had this whole area of benefits that was emerging from this particular pilot. So you can see some of them here. So it did provide student teachers with the opportunity to work alongside family learning staff who themselves use a range of engagement strategies to engage parents and families from varying demographics. Now, I'm sure you're all aware that parents don't come in a cookie cutter fashion. So there are some families that may need a variety of different engagement strategies to get them even through the door. So these student teachers were being exposed to that at a very early stage within their teaching career. That in turn helped to develop the student teachers' confidence to work with parents and families. And again, that's at the start of their career, not whilst they're working. So you can only build on that moving forward. And that's certainly the impact statements that we were hearing from the Edinburgh Council teachers who were engaged in the very, very early stages. Also, which an impact that we were hopeful that the student teachers would be exposed to was about barriers to participation. So for some some students that we interviewed, they talked about, themselves getting strategies from parents around ASN. There were parents who had mental health issues. There were parents who potentially, had been in prison. So they were gaining all of this knowledge and understanding at a very early stage. Students were more flexible due to the placement not being part of their ITE programme. They really, really liked that. And they were able to utilise the learning in their teaching practice. And what was really interesting was that they were able to connect the theory into practice again at a very early stage. So we've been really blown away by the areas of impact. Some of the things that are not there that I think is probably important as well is that staff from the universities and from the local authorities are saying that they really have strong partnerships as well coming out of this pilot that will be sustainable even after we move on to the national rollout. So yeah, we would encourage you to come along to the launch of the resource, and you'll get to hear from them themselves. But we also have, if you're interested, the podcast series.
So just coming to the end of our presentation and the next steps, we are working with our colleagues in Education Scotland, and we have another national webinar coming up in November, and that will be looking at the curriculum improvement cycle reform and what is that and what does it mean for parents and families. The IT placement programme rollout, we'll be doing that once the evaluation report and executive summary has been published. We continue our professional collaboration and training with practitioners and educators across the whole of Scotland, and we are working with some international colleagues on attendance globally. So that's just some of the key priorities that we have. You've heard us talk a lot about Education Scotland's webpage. Once you go into the actual page, the main website, you'll see a tab for practitioners resources, and if you click on that, then you'll see the parents and families page there, and you'll get all the documents that we have talked about. So I'll just hand back to Max. If anybody has any questions, we're more than happy to answer those.
Thank you so much.